even, if you and I went out to lunch, one of us might take a picture of it, and part of it is just like we're savoring it, we're recognizing it, we're paying attention to it. And by pausing and by absorbing something with a camera, I found somehow it heals, it brings joy or peace or happiness or something. That's still why I take pictures. I still see it as a means of healing and restoration and growth and all of that.
Welcome to the Viewfinders Photography Podcast. You just heard from this week's guest, Chris Orwig, a portrait photographer based in California. Chris has so much to say about photography and what it is to be a photographer. So whatever genre you're into, stick around, there's something here for you. Graham Dargy here. I'm a professional photographer based in Aberdeen, Scotland. It's like the furthest place away from California, really. And this is the podcast where we trace the journey of fantastic photographers from all around the world to find those little sparks of inspiration that can take our photography to new and exciting places. Alright, my guest today is Chris Orwig, a portrait photographer, author, teacher and Sony Ambassador from Santa Barbara, California. Chris first came on my radar many years ago, and his grounded, connected, intimate, natural light portraits really stayed with me. In his early 20s, Chris was hit by a car while skateboarding, and during his recovery, his father gave him the gift of a camera. The camera gave him purpose and direction in life, and he's never looked back. Chris has gone on to work with clients including Google, SPaceX, Adobe, and his work's been published in places like Rolling Stone, the New York Times and Esquire. He's also taught photography at college level for 10 years, written several books, and he's a workshop leader and mentor to other photographers around the world. Chris has a lot to say about photography and what goes into being a photographer, and I was delighted to listen. Of course, we talk about portrait photography, but so much of what Chris says is about who we are as photographers, and that's transferable to all of us. So whatever you're into, I'm sure this episode is for you. Hope you enjoy this half as much as I did. Here's my conversation with Chris Orwig. Chris Orwig, welcome to Viewfinders Photography Podcast. How are you?
I am really well. I'm so excited to be here, and it's so fun that we get to have a conversation, even though we live in different parts of the world, but share a similar passion.
Yeah, it's cool. Thank you for your time. I'm so excited to talk to you because I was following you some time ago. I just dug out your book, Visual Poetry, from my garage. You might say garage, I guess. So I have a box of photography books in there. And so I had that. It's a long time ago that I had that. And checked in with you lately, and you're still doing really cool work. I love your kind of laid back style and your California vibe, and your photography style sort of seems to embody that. So really excited to get into it with you. It looks really sunny on your side. How's the weather there today?
Yes, it is. It is actually very sunny and warm and beautiful. I live in a town right next to the ocean, or along the ocean, Santa Barbara in California. And in October, the sun's getting much closer to the horizon line. It's lower in the sky, so the sea just shimmers. I don't know how it is up there for you all, but so it can the light in the fall is really special. I don't know what it is, if it's because it's coming through, more some of the moisture in the air. It's a little colder. Maybe it's the opposite of that. Maybe because it's a little colder, the air is thinner, but it just has this keen, beautiful look. I love it. It's so fun to shoot this time of year.
Yeah. Same here. I live right on the coast as well.
Yeah.
The best part about living here really is in the night, in the evening, when there's a full moon and a clear sky, and it's just amazing to look out on the sea. On those times. So yeah, it's great to live by the sea. I love it. So yeah, did you grow up in California? Have you always been there?
Yeah, the majority of my life was here. I was born in the middle of the U.S. in Michigan, but I think when I was 3, I moved out to California, and that's been a big part of my story. But I think more importantly, because I work with a lot of students, is help. And what I try to do with my students is help them become aware of their story. And like you were saying, my work kind of has this California laid back vibe. And that really is because that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it reflects me. So if someone sees my work, I hope they have a sense on who I am. And then when they meet me, they're like, oh, you're just like I expected. And the reason I say that is with my students, I'm always encouraging them to find that synchronicity with who they are, what they value, how they see life, even the rhythm of life. Like if they just are really snappy and edgy and strong and big and bold. I had one student, just this huge guy, muscular, and his work didn't quite have that spirit in it. And so we talked about that, talked about where he's from, where he wants to be, where he's going. Anyway, and once he started to bring that in himself into his work, it just was like fireworks. It went so much further. So anyway, I know that was just a question about geography, but I do think geography, identity, becoming self-aware and all those things is really important, to finding your own style in this space, because photography is so hard to have style, right? Because the gear is so good now. I mean, it's like everyone shoots with the same stuff. It's all great. Nothing's bad. The only differentiating factor is style.
Yeah. When I started the podcast, like I'd always looked at other photographers that I would admire, and I wonder, like, why are they taking that kind of picture and I'm
Right.
not, or I'm taking the ones which I would have perceived as not as good. And that was really what I wanted to ask people. Like, there would be a few people on my list that I just really wanted to talk to and just like find out why they take their pictures the way they do. And the thing that's really ran through all of it is just exactly what you said, actually. The people whose work is in tune with just who they are, they know it, they know their story, they know why they do it. And once you hear their backstory, like, the photography just makes sense, Yeah. So that's actually what I've found, just more or less what you said about talking to all these other photographers from around the world, is the photography just comes out of exactly who they are, and people who are not trying to be something else or someone else, they're just doing their own thing, seem to have this sort of strongest identity on their photography,
Yeah. And to even add to that, I think I'm thinking of colleagues and friends and different people I know. It's not just the positive side of our identities either. Like one of my mentors, his work is very organized and orderly, and he had so much internal chaos that he turned to photography as a way to seek order and peace and serenity. And so it was like what he didn't have inside, he found in the frame.
Mm-hmm.
And once he tapped into being aware of that is when he really started to become famous. Or even, he shared something with me about portraiture, which resonates and I still kind of use to this day. Is he said, I would photograph people who had character qualities I wish that I had myself. So someone who overcame adversity, or someone who was older and was wise, or someone who was elegant, or someone who was thoughtful, whatever it was. But just to kind of, you're searching for something versus just saying, wow, beautiful person, take a picture. Wow, isn't that a great picture?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than that, it's coming from within. And sometimes it's coming from the within that is the stuff that isn't going well within, or you're searching for, or you're needing. Other times, let's say like the California spirit, so to speak, that's something that comes from things I enjoy. So that's more of a positive side. I like being outdoors. I like living along the coast. I like these things. So that's more of like the positive stuff that filters in. But also I take time going to the dark stuff. There's this one quote by Plutarch, who was a philosopher a couple thousand years ago, but he said, music to find harmony must investigate discord. And I like that. It's like, you got to go dark to find light, haha, we've heard that, but it's true. And I think internally I spend time doing that, exploring the darkness. What am I lacking in? What are my edges where I need to grow? And then how can I bring photography there versus beautiful landscape or pretty person or great light. I found that's just not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to you need to fill the frame with more.
Mm-hmm. So it's part of your
Do you agree?
practice.
Or
Well, yeah, I'm curious to know if that how part of your practice then is to take time out to do sort of self-reflection, or like how do you do that?
well, yeah, I mean, I journal, or I'll write poems, or like just yesterday I was writing a poem about this idea that I practice meditation, and how recently I've been feeling kind of self-congratulatory in my um, stillness and patience and peace. And and then we were at dinner this weekend for my daughter's birthday, and something happened and I got frustrated. My daughter pointed it out, and I just thought, how funny. The universe has a way of reminding us that, and it's true in photography too. When you think like, oh, I got this, all of a sudden it's like that lens you thought you're going to shoot with, you forgot, or
Mm-hmm.
that camera you thought you were going to use, like the card malfunctions or something happens, and you're like, okay, back to the drawing board. But I wanted to write about that experience to really just, develop that self-awareness, and that to realize the dangers of success in any area. In this case, it was in mindfulness and being patient and different things. But because I'm going to New York tomorrow and I'm going to be shooting, and just to really go in with openness, not with like, oh, I'm going to nail it. I
Mm-hmm.
got this. Because my best pictures usually come from, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
um, so yes. So to answer that question, it's just a regular part of it. Or, um, have good friends that call me out on stuff, or read books and learn from other people, biographies or different things.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so let's go back.
Yeah.
I read that your dad was into photography and had some black and white prints in the attic, and that must have been a source of inspiration for you. Was what age were you, roughly, or when you remember photography sort of coming into the picture?
Yeah. I mean, it was this fun thing where he, like, you kind of discover something about one of your parents. My dad, he had this love of photography, and he had done black and white photography, and then he stopped when he had kids, my brother, sister, and I. And so there's always kind of like this sense of sadness, like, oh, like, why did he give that up? And how cool is that? And he had these pictures, and he was creative. And then years later, I was talking with another friend who said, yeah, it's interesting how in our life someone can plant a seed just of something as being like, oh, that's interesting. I guess similar to someone can say, I don't know, that looks like a tree that would be fun to climb. And you're like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. Right.
Yeah.
So I think I just, from a young age had that. And so in a way, probably it was kind of picking up on something that my dad had let go of. And in high school, I took a class. I was horrible at photography. I just hadn't evolved enough, I don't think, as a person. I've looked back at those photos. My parents have them, and they're like of hubcaps, or like, I mean, just they don't even make sense. But then it came back into my life after I was going through some bunch of health stuff, and my dad gave me a camera, and it was something creative I could do in spite of all the chronic health stuff I was dealing with. And so it was kind of fun how something like this little thread was woven through life. And then maybe it's like a little thread sticking out of your shirt or something, and then you tug on it, and at one point you pull it out and you're like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize there's so much to that. And that happened kind of later in life for me.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what you were referring to, but there was a time when you were hit by a car.
Yes.
Yeah, and so obviously that's from what I read on your website bio, that seemed
Yeah.
like a pivotal moment in your life. I don't want to traumatize you or anything, but to
Yeah,
go
no,
back
no.
to that,
Yeah.
what happened around that really set you on the path for photography, I guess?
Yeah, I mean that, and that's it's a great question. So like I was using a wheelchair. I had a lot of chronic pain at the time, and more so, I was in my young 20s, and I was lost a lot of hope because I'm like,
Hmm.
man, if I'm this bad right now, how bad am I going to be 10 years from
Okay.
now? So you're
So
kind of
yeah, so from the accident, it was quite bad, yeah.
Yeah, and I had gone around to all these different medical institutions here in the US, Stanford, UCLA, Mayo Clinic, and just was trying to find solutions, but wasn't finding anything. So there was the frustration of that. There's the physical discomfort. There's your future. There's a lot. And
Hmm.
anyone who suffered something for an extended period of time knows how it can snowball in these kind of strange, overwhelming ways. It's not rational, really, but what is rational in life? I mean, like someone could tell you, like, well, it's not that bad. You're not going to die, and it's like, true, true. That's a good point. But I'm still in a dark place.
Yeah.
And then, so during that time, my dad gave me a camera. And what's interesting is tying this all together is I know it's a camera he would have loved to have bought for himself.
Mm.
It wasn't that he had like tons of money laying around and just like bought an extra camera. It literally, like, he didn't have a camera. He still loved photography, but he gave me this camera, and that just helped. That changed everything. It helped me to shift my focus off of myself, and onto the world
Hmm.
and onto other people. And that shift to this day was healing. Still is healing. I think that's one of the reasons why we practice photography. Even if you and I went out to lunch, if I came to visit and our lunch looked cool, one of us might take a picture of it. And
Hmm.
part of it is just like we're savoring it, we're recognizing it, we're paying attention to it, or if there was beautiful, sunset or something. And by pausing and by absorbing something with a camera, I found somehow it heals. It brings joy or peace or happiness or something. you
Hmm.
know so yeah, so that's part of the journey for me. And it's funny, it's like that hasn't ended for me either. It wasn't like that was then and this is now. That's still why I take pictures. I still see it as a means of healing and restoration and growth and all of that. It's not heroism for me at all. I think it's maybe like some people. Let me just think of something like one friend who was really into horseback riding, and for her, it's very therapeutic to
Hmm.
ride horses. It's not like she's racing or she wants to show off or she wants to, but it's like it is her therapy.
Hmm.
And so I've found that as a part of my therapy, so to speak, is photography.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
even doing this, talking with you, hanging out. I mean, how cool is this?
Yeah, I was wondering if you get that from surfing as well or any other pastimes.
I do, yeah. And that's, I mean, back because I'm a teacher, so to put on the teacher hat too. I mean, I'm happy to talk about my own journey, but I always try to bring it back to my students' journey, which is, I'll answer the surfing thing in 1 second. But I taught for a decade at a college level photography school. It was really intense, really great school. And I had a number of students burn out, and I would ask them, like, and they would burn out to the point they said, I'm never doing photography again. And here they went to 4 years of college to do this, right?
Hmm.
And then so I was like, oh my gosh, like, what are you talking about? And so I'd say, well, how come? And what'd you do during school? And they said during photography school, all they did was photography. And they would kind of be sullen and they would kind of sink down in their chair when they would tell me that. I just worked really hard at photography. And it was great and it was fun. It was interesting. Then I would say, what'd you do before school? And they would light up and lean forward and said, oh, before school, I used to play soccer. Or I was, I had a horse, or whatever. I don't know, something. And so what it made me realize was that, really quickly, really early on, and I saw this when you start to work with like hundreds and then thousands of students, you see these patterns. that the best photographers cultivate interest outside of photography. And it's true with the best artists. It's true with the best actors. It's true with the best painters. Yes, they do have a focus on one thing that maybe they're really good at, but they're also doing these other things. So you mentioned for me, surfing, getting out in the ocean, which I was out in the ocean yesterday with my 2 daughters. Like, that just lights my soul on fire. I mean, it is so amazing. There were dolphins out and the shimmering water and just even catching these waves. And I paddle for this one wave. I stand up on this wave. I'm going down the line, and just, it's like this beauty. You're just like flying, right? You're flying on water almost. My daughter's paddling back out towards the point where to catch a wave. So I go past her and I give her a high five as I go by. And it just, I mean, it fills your heart with joy. Same thing as just, I do a walk with my dogs every morning. This morning in the dark, and the stars were out, and it's very quiet. And then the sun starts to rise and you hear the birds. And anyway, all of that is part of my photographic practice. And for my students, what I encourage them to do, or for, our friends listening, is to, really ask yourself, well, what are these different things or areas in your life that are important to you? And what can you do that can feed your soul? What can you do that can help you to cultivate a sense of adventure? Because photography is adventurous. It requires risk. There's a sense of failure, so maybe it's, like when someone's stuck in a rut, basically it's like you would imagine a rut maybe from I don't know, like a wagon. Like, I'm thinking old fashioned wagon stuck in a rut on a dirt road or something. It's because they've just been going in the same direction for the last 100 miles and they can't get out of the rut. There's no way out. So my thought is like, okay, let's get off this wagon. Let's just go for a walk, like something different. And then when I do that with students, a lot of times they're like, wow, this is a pretty cool place we are right now. I'm like, it is, isn't it? And then we look back at the little wagon in the rut and we're like, how can we pull that thing out? I have an idea, so I find that, I'm sure you talk with, all these interesting people. What makes their photography interesting is they lead interesting lives. They're interesting. They're interesting themselves. And then that makes their work interesting. But you can't be a dull, stressed out, angry, mean, I don't know what, depressed person and create beautiful work. It just doesn't work that way. So it's like, work on who you are, and then that comes into the imagery. That's at least what I found.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Just to sort of finish up on this kind of section, when you were in your early days of photography, was it always people and portraits you were shooting, or how did you journey towards that?
Yeah, no, at first when I started photography, I think like a lot of us, we just photograph everything. You photograph leaves and rocks and trees and I don't know, cars and food and coffee and anything that just kind of the curiosity of like, well, how does this look through a camera or through the lens or in this light? And I think that's a great place to start. So I encourage people to start there if they're there, even with our iPhones or mobile phones or whatever. Yeah, shoot everything. But then eventually start to refine what that is. And because that's how you get good at photography. For example, I'm just going to go to travel photography. Let's say I go visit you, which would be amazing. First day, I might just photograph everything. Like, oh my gosh, everything's interesting to me. But then it's like, well, I need to do a project. I need to photograph. I need to get portraits of shopkeepers. I'm making this up. Or of athletes. There's a bunch of people. Let's say there's a soccer field in your town, and I start playing soccer with them. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do something very focused, not do everything, do one thing. So anyway, that's how it happened for me. And that led to, after shooting everything, asking myself, what do I get the most out of? And it was like, even let's say a question of a landscape or a landscape with a person in it. And it was always a landscape with a person in it. Now, other people, my students, will say, oh man, every time I see a person in my landscape, it just makes me want to cringe. All I want is just this clean, empty, beautiful landscape. And I'm like, bingo. You have just defined something so important to your career and your photography. And even if that person goes on to shoot, thinking of one of my students went on to shoot automotive stuff, really famous, renowned automotive photographer. He would shoot cars and landscapes, but he would also always take time when he was in those landscapes to get the landscapes without any cars or people, because that fed his soul, if that makes sense, you know. So he had his commercial hat on, but then he also kept that passion alive. Where for me, if I'm shooting a landscape, I'm always asking, well, you know, how could a subject fit into this frame, and who's someone I could connect with here in this location, and yada, yada, yada. So back to that was just asking ourselves, what lights the fire? You know, that's an important question. And we're all different in that way. And that's the beautiful thing. And that's why the world needs all of us as photographers, is to show what we think kind of matters, right?
I wanted to take a minute to talk about your new book, Authentic Portraits, because this is really interesting to me, because this is a word that I've been using in my own photography branding, and I do mostly corporate headshots, but it's a word that that's become important to me. I've been using a lot, authenticity. The value of that has become really high in my own life, and that's why I've begun to apply it to my photography, because it's important to me in my work as well, that, you know, when you do a corporate shoot, a lot of the time people want a white background shot. That's what they need. And for me, you don't want to be a passport machine, do you know? Right. You want to still give them what they want, what they need, the white background shot, but still with some style in the lighting and the craft of it, but always with the authenticity, with the engagement with the subject, you know? So yeah, it's something that's important to me for those reasons, but I wanted to pick up on the term for you and your definition, because I'm sure somebody will be thinking, well, any photograph of anything is authentic. So for you, what does that really mean, authentic portraits, if you could talk about what that means?
Yeah. And I think it's cool. I mean, to go back to your corporate headshots too, is, you know, those terms are very strong terms, corporate and headshot. They're very limited terms, you know. It's like, you know, and so we instantly like go somewhere with them. And I think when we layer or we add authenticity to that mix, like say authentic corporate headshots, it's like, oh, okay, I'm thinking something differently. And so I think part of it is that it's just taking that moment, just like you described, to say, okay, yeah, I may be in a situation. How do I, in my mind, I think of kind of get beneath the surface. I like how Aristotle put it. He said, art isn't about outward appearance, but inward significance. And I also think about portraits of myself or people I care about. It doesn't just show how they look, but it shows who they are. It shows something of their character, their personality, maybe their soul, maybe their inner essence. And so I just like that idea that it's sort of a striving, it's just searching. I love how Van Gogh talked about art. He talked about it kind of as this hunt, is like always searching for it, but never finding it in full. And I think that's authentic, kind of fits into that. You never like, wow, that's an authentic image, you know, because nothing ever is. In the same way that maybe if I were to jump to some different topic, let me go to like fitness. We'll see if this works. Maybe it won't, but let's say I like biking, you know. You would never say like, wow, I'm like really fit. Okay, done. It's like, actually, no, I have to still ride tomorrow and next week and next month and next year, and then I'll get older and I'll change or have an injury, and so my fitness at one time is different than another. So it's always we're always working towards quote fitness. And then I would say same thing with authenticity. We're working towards it, and it's not something that, you know, I feel like some people, you know, you photograph and they're just not ready for going deep with it, or it's a headshot and you're like, okay, I'm gonna just, I got to keep it relevant to the task at hand. I do headshots as well, but how do I add that extra little something? And so that's what intrigues me about it. And you don't do it by saying like, tell me your deepest, darkest secret, or tell me what, you love most about life. Because that would make it very inauthentic. And I think we become authentic. Let's see when we start to forget and stop thinking about ourselves so much. Does that make sense? So it almost has to happen naturally. So you have to, that's where the craft and the art of it is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for you too, in those headshot situations, right? It's not like you can ask the same question to 10 people. If you're doing headshots for a company and 10 people are coming through, each time it's a little different. Each time there's a little subtlety to it. And each time, sometimes you get a little closer, sometimes you don't quite get it. But that makes it different than the traditional photographic language, which is nailed it. Which is like, oh, that's something like you're done, like it's complete. I like more that Van Gogh concept of art of like, I'm just so close, but I'm not quite there. And just that. And I like musicians like that. I like poetry like that. I like books like that. I like them that, yes, it is a completed work, or yes, it is, beautiful and wonderful, but it's also just, I guess, if I think of a photograph that's like nailed it and done, I think of like stock photography. It's like a girl with a red balloon, nailed it. You're like, okay, you kind of did. Does nothing for me.
Yeah.
So I like something with a little more mystery, awe, curiosity, wonder, perplexity, thoughtfulness, all those things. And I think that's what makes us authentic, right? It's all the imperfections, or the other photos, with portraiture that are over retouched, and you're like, oh, wow, if you think that's good, or that's finished or something, I don't know. That's great, but it's obviously not, I would say it's not authentic, right? You're like, wow, that's a highly glamorized version of that person. If that's your goal, awesome. But that isn't my goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, totally. Just one of the quotes that I found somewhere was you saying, what I enjoy most about photography is finding the light within others and connecting in a meaningful way. I feel like that is really getting towards what we're getting at with the authenticity. Is there anything you could say or expand on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I do practice yoga and really enjoy and appreciate that. And at the end of many yoga classes, the teacher says the term namaste. And I love there's many ways that term is defined, but my favorite is the light in me recognizes the light in you. And so the whole point, I think, of bringing that up is that we have to go inside. Like, we have to have a lot of self-acceptance before we can accept someone in front of our lens. We have to have a lot of self-love before we can fully love someone else. And so I think where this comes from, and this whole sense of light and seeing light in other people is of course out there, but also in here, in us, and taking time to do the work. And maybe to be more specific, for many years of my life, I really struggled with self-acceptance. And I felt like if you were to really see who I was deep down inside, you would not like, love, appreciate that person. And so a lot of my photography was sort of searching for other people to fill that void I hadn't yet filled myself. And then when I came to a better self-acceptance, through a series of events and different things, then that shifted how I could see people. And it was like I was less needy, if that makes sense. And that created more spaciousness in the photo shoots, more of a celebration of each other's light or love or sadness or whatever the emotion was. And that helped deepen the experience or the image or the connection. So, I mean, all of this kind of bringing it back to, I think, our listeners is realizing that when someone comes, like if you're going to capture a portrait, let's say in a couple of days, I'm going to capture a portrait of someone, business owner, thought leader, influencer in New York City. I have to think about that person. Her name's Emily, and which I have been thinking about, but I also have to do some of my own internal work. And that is as important as doing the work for thinking about the subject. Does that make sense? I don't know if I was clear on that, but well, let me just go to my students. Like I would see a student who would be so stressed out about their camera settings, stressed out about, or they're nervous because of the subject, whatever. And the image would just look horrible, but it was a beautiful or a handsome person. And they would say, how did I mess that up so badly? And we would just talk about like, well, how are you feeling? Like, oh, I was just, they were like dying of anxiety. So the anxiety just was the only thing that could fill the frame up. And then we would talk about, well, how do you deal with anxiety? I mean, anxiety often is a little alarm of saying like something's wrong and asking us, well, what's wrong? They're like, well, I was really worried about, using lights in this way. I'm like, okay, great. I need you to go try that with 10 different people until you don't even have to think about it. And then they do that and then they come back and then they're like, wow, I don't feel anxious anymore. I say, yeah. Of course you don't, because now you don't have to think about it. And then they're like, well, then I was really anxious because I felt like they wouldn't like me. And I'm like, well, why do you think that? And this is because, like I was kind of dressed sloppy. I'm like, oh, okay. So one of the things you realize is important is what version of yourself you're bringing or you're projecting. Like, okay, for your next shoot, why don't you try dressing in a way that you feel, let's say like corporate headshots. If you go in with like jeans that have holes on them and, shoes that are kind of dirty and untucked shirt, and it's a really formal corporate setting, you're not going to connect with your subject, So like discover how to be in tune with those things. Anyway, with the students, you can kind of imagine that then, you just see these things as these opportunities to learn and grow, and you go inward, you figure some of that inward stuff out, then in the moment, you're able to capture something better, stronger, more interesting because of that.
Yeah. Just before we round up on this section, there was, I saw the video, just like a trailer on your website for The Creative Fight. And I really loved that teaser. I don't have that book, but
send me your address. I'll send you one.
Oh, thanks.
No, I will. It'll be fun.
Oh, well, that's really kind. So I like the title because, I think what we're touching on a little bit here already. There can sort of be a romanticized idea of creativity or what it's like to be a photographer or whatever, but it's such a fight sometimes, isn't it? I mean, can you say something about what the creative fight is, what that means to you, and how we can maybe find a way through it?
Yeah, and that comes back, I'm always kind of bringing it back to teaching because I do workshops and I speak and these things, and also because that always comes from my own journey. But when I would work with students, you quickly realize that there's these two sides to creativity. There's the flow and there's the fight. And the flow is when you're caught up in the moment and everything's amazing and wonderful. And I mean, when those things happen, it's great. So one of the next books I'm going to write is called The Creative Flow, to kind of bookend the creative fight. But the other side, the creative fight, is this idea that sometimes it's like what you're up against is so big, it's so overwhelming. Even like the student with the lighting, whatever. I think that's the fight. It's like lights on. It's like, yeah, oh my gosh, this is such a fight. Okay, how do we deconstruct this? How do we figure this out? How do we take it apart? How do we do this step by step? And looking throughout history of people who have done that, whether it's writers or I don't know, so many different people in the world, but most creative people are creative because of an obstacle. Because when you think of it, creativity, in my mind, is making the most with whatever is at hand in search of a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you and I are on this podcast right now, and all of a sudden the audio quality just goes bad, so we have a problem, and say, well, hey, what if we just switch over to using our cell phones? Creative solution in the moment, if we're trying to make something positive. And so that book is really looking at this whole process and exercising those muscles and really getting into that side where I know what it is too. This is what happened with a lot of my students. A lot of the students would drop out in the first year of school because they fell in love with the idea of being a photographer versus the work it took to get there. And this happens in workshops and seminars, and I mentor people. They're so in love with this idea, the flow, that they overlook or neglect that it's a ton of work and it's a craft. And so if you want to get good at any craft, wood carving, man, it's a ton of work to like really figure out how to use tools, make sure you don't cut yourself, understand wood and grain and finishing and all this kind of stuff. And photography is the same way. It's like any craft that requires discipline, drive, focus, attention to detail, and all of this stuff. And so that's, I think, a lot of where that book actually originally came from. And then looking at my own experience and also the experience. I don't know if this happens to you at all, but sometimes I'll do a shoot and it just like is perfect. And I'll do the same shoot, same kind of lighting setup or same something, you know, and it just every inch of the way is not flowing. It's not happening. And at first that used to frustrate me. And then I thought, okay, rather than get frustrated, let's rewind a little bit. Let's think about what is going on. And what it really is it's a moment, or it's an opportunity to really exercise your creative muscles and become creatively stronger, right? Because if we always flow, we're never really growing or learning. And so that's what that book's dedicated to. And so it's been that's a book, if anyone's interested, if you're in a tough part of your creative process, that's a good book to turn to. And I have a lot of people who send me notes like, oh, this one pulled me out of the ditch, or even more meaningful, you know, I had a family member die and this one helped me, you know, creatively explore how to get through and move through that. So it could be lots of layers there, or lots of levels. But
I just resonate with the title, at least, because you know it's a push and a pull, and you get those shoots, you get those occasional shoots that just go, but more often than not, you're gonna have to fight to get that picture in the camera, you know.
You are,
but when you're in the flow of it and you understand the rhythm of it, it's okay, you can deal with it. But earlier on, it could be overwhelming to kind of realize that. So I'll look forward to receiving the book. Okay, I wanted to touch on something. You have a really brilliant YouTube channel with lots of tutorials, which are really clear, and your friendly style works really well. You get straight to the point. I wanted to pick up on one of the videos, which I felt like probably encapsulates a lot of your approach, but we can get on it to give listeners something to take away with. So on this video, there were 3 points, and maybe we can expand or discuss those 3 points, but they were clarify your vision, carry less to capture more, and find the light. And I just thought there was so much in that. Why do those 3 things work so well in sequence like that? And can you talk a little bit more about those things?
Yeah, that's so fun. Yeah, I mean, well, here's what happens to me. So let's say I'm trying to just make up. Well, I'm going to be in New York, as I mentioned, which is exciting for me because I live on the opposite side of the country, and so it's very creatively inspiring. There's lots of visual, you know, inspiration. There's lots of amazing people. It's just it's a moment. And if I walk in that situation without a vision, I'll just end up shooting everything and also nothing. And I see that happen all the time. And so I think having a sense and clarity of what am I searching for? What am I looking for? And this gets back to myself. who am I right now at this stage in my life? And so spending time to articulate that. So even from a standpoint of, let's say last night I did a family photo shoot down at the beach. And when I photograph families, I'm looking for warmth, love, connection, authenticity. There's that word again, small moments. And so when I define that vision, like if there are always moments where there's frustration in families, the family dynamic kind of goes awry. I don't shoot that. I have colleagues that do, because they find that so humorous. And so all their family photo shoots will have these like awkward, tense moments. And that's because that's part of their vision. And so I just want my students, or I want myself to like clarify, what is it? What do you like? What don't you like? What in New York, what am I actually shooting? Am I going to go shoot, let's say like street photography? You can do street photography, a small person in a big space. I could do that. Like my whole vision is small people in big spaces, which means like they fit in the shadows, they fit in the gap between the building, and shooting with like a 35 millimeter focal length. And this is my vision. I'm going to shoot 20 strong traditional street photography photographs that are about light and shadow and space and composition. Or I'm going to shoot 20 street photographs that are up close portraits. I'm going to go and I'm going to connect with people on the street, which is what I do usually. And I'm going to shoot, 10 to 20 of those. So I have to fight to do this. I got to get out there. I got to walk the streets. I got to find the people. I got to approach them. I got to get over my nervousness. So anyway, that's all about the clarify the vision. So that's that's first one is, and maybe just reflecting that back to you. Do you find that in your own photography that having, when you have lack of clarity versus clarity, that the clarity you accomplish more?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I get it from the client, whoever's bringing me in, the contact person, marketing person, PR, whoever. And I try and get as much as I can, because shoot, that's the vision, like how they see it, what their brand values are, and so on. And because if you're left to like, oh, just I mean, you don't, inevitably you get it wrong, so you need to get that cast to you. So that's for work. Recreationally, if I'm shooting landscape photography, I kind of know what I like and what I like to do with that. So yeah, I can definitely vouch for that one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's great to hear. And that made me think of one student I'm mentoring who's in India right now, and she's just shooting kind of everything under the sun, which is great. But what I encourage people, if you don't have vision, and let's say you have 2 days in a town, let's say you're doing travel photography, day one, just shoot everything, but day two, impose some kind of limits upon what you're shooting. And even back to like your corporate work, like you were saying, like, yeah, you could kind of shoot some. I think I know what they mean. But then I also know they need 3/4 length. They need vertical shots on a white background. They want them to be positive and strong and snappy, a little edgy, because we're a modern company, versus more traditional lighting. Got it. I'm going to get that. So have that clarity. And then the next part is carry less and capture more. And the idea behind that one is that what tends to happen with people who are newer to photography is they have these camera bags stuffed with all kinds of gear, all kinds of options. And then what they capture usually isn't as strong, because again, their vision's like, well, maybe I'm going to do this. Like, let's say me in New York, maybe I'm going to do some architecture stuff. Maybe I'm going to do some traditional street stuff. Maybe I'm going to do some compression. So I need my 100 to 400. Maybe I'm going to do stuff on a tripod. I'll do long night exposure. Maybe then I would have this bag that I couldn't even open. And I don't know if you can hear my dog barking.
Yeah.
But, she's outside right now. But when I spend time with people who are really good at photography, say like a friend, Chris Burkhardt, he's an outdoor adventure photographer. When I'm around him, when he shoots, it's interesting. His kit is actually really small. So he will just have like on him, like a camera and a lens, and he's in this really, really special location. But that limitation the carrying of less allows him to be so creative. He has to fight for it because he can't just be like, well, I'll just use this, or I'll use that, or, but he's also not tangled up in the mess of all of that. So whether or not people own a lot of gear, it's more of a philosophical concept, I think, of saying, you know what, like, let some things go, but really focus in on what it is you want to do. And I would even go, like in the classroom, we would talk about brands or companies or restaurants. If you go to, say, a coffee shop, which products they sell, like what kind of coffee and tea they have, what kind of maybe pastries. But they also don't sell hamburgers and French fries and Coke and popcorn and cotton candy. It would be the weirdest coffee shop in the world. No one would go to it because you're like, what are you? But all good brands are very limited in what they offer when you get to whatever that offering is. I mean, some people will say, well, let's look at Google. They have many different aspects, but there is a thread which connects them. And there always will be exceptions, but I think I don't need to go down the brand route, but just this idea of carrying less, like carry less baggage, less need to capture everything under the sun, and then really but do the work. Make sure you're doing the work based on your vision. So vision first, and then execute the vision. So those are the first two parts of that process. Does that resonate with you, or
yeah,
do you have pushback on that, which would be fine, or thoughts about that?
No, I understand, and I think obviously, like, creativity thrives within boundaries. I was packing the car on Friday, and I was wondering if this would come up when we were going to talk the other day, because I took so much stuff with me. I mean, so much stuff comes with me nowadays. And I knew I was talking to you, and so much of your work is natural light. And I was packing the car going, is all this stuff just a crutch? Do I really need it? And so, yeah, maybe that's something for me to reflect on. But yeah, I get that. And it's a real challenge, I think, I recognize what you said about traveling as well. When we went to Japan a few years ago, I took everything, like as much as I could. And yes. I ended up, like, my back was so killed. Oh. And you're just like, oh, I'm going to do this. I got to change the lens now. I've got to change it again. And yeah, it's a nightmare, but it's really counterintuitive for us, isn't it? At the same time, to be like, well, I'm not going to, but I might need it.
Yes. Yeah. Cause all of that is fear, right? I might need this, or what about that? And it's second guessing, and if only that, versus, this is what my mentors taught me, they would say things like, okay, shoot with one lens for a week, and you do these images, and then use this old media card, which only allows you to capture 20 images or something. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Yeah. And so it just brings an intentionality to it. It's an intentionality we used to have with film, which was $0.25 per click. And then larger formats, one camera I used, every click was $10. And so just that there was some cost associated with it, and not that we need to beat ourselves up and go back to shooting that way. But I think adding a layer of, okay, what's my intention here? What am I trying to say? And then what's that based on my vision, which your vision is based on who you are and what you care about and what you value. And then I think if you can connect those two, it can be a fun way to elevate your photography and speak to a wider audience. Because I think sometimes we think we speak to a wider audience by just offering more, going back to the coffee shop. We think, well, if we sell cotton candy, well, maybe kids will come to our coffee shop. But really, everyone loses. But if you think of a coffee shop, it's kind of a beautiful concept. It sells coffee and tea, and then a couple other things. That's it. And that's why we enjoy them. That's why people go there to work in them, because they're not cluttered. They're not everything. They're just a very small, simple, refreshing one thing, really. Yeah. And I think if you look at the great artists out there, they have that. Even if they shoot different subject matter, there's a thread, a one thing, which comes from their vision, which comes from then executing that vision. And I should say too, there are occasions where you need a lot of gear, or you need a lot of lighting options, or a lot of setups, or whatever. That's fine. and that comes for most of us later. But I think most of our problems, at least my students, it's that we're bringing too much, and we're doing that out of fear. And so what I would say is encourage people to just try to keep it simple, try to really understand the gear that you have. I mean, let's go to lighting, for example. This is why one light workshops are so popular. It's like start with one light, and then eventually if you're going to add 10 lights, that's fine. But don't start with 10, you know?
Yeah,
And I think most amateurs, they're like, oh, I need to do all this. And then, or even my friend Chris Burkhardt, he still keeps it really simple. And he's, you know, one of the most famous photographers in the world. And I think if people saw how simple he kept it, they would be like, wait, what? That's all, like, that's all you have? But it's like anyone who's great at something, you know, like even like a great chef, you'll just say like, wait, you're just using those ingredients and but it's like, yeah, the way they combine them, they're not masking it with some like something else, or they're not dressing it up, you know, with other things. It's the simplicity. So that's where that second step comes in.
Yeah, I get that. I love the chef analogy. One of my daughter's friends' dads is a chef. Like he's a really good chef, and I'm not like chefy at all, but I love talking to him because of you know, just the creativity and like what they can do with little, like you're saying. It's, I think there are parallels there with photography for sure.
And then if you think of like, I'm not a chef either, but I have one friend who's really good as well. I think people who aren't good at cooking, they just like add cheese or something. And you're like, or they add a ton of butter, or, you know, and the real chef, it's the subtlety. It's like they're taking these few things based on their vision, right? And then they're not overdoing it, you know. And maybe it's like the kid version of it is like the kid that like puts too much sugar in the cookie mix, you know. It's like, yeah, sugar is good, but you got to have less of that, right? And so in photography, the sugary stuff, so to speak, we need less of that, less gimmicks, less all this stuff, get down to some of the basics, you know. And so
but do it well and season, you know, get the nuances good. I think it's good stuff.
Yeah, and then the third one, now I'm blanking on the third one.
The third one is find the light.
Oh yeah, find the light. Yeah. I got so excited about the second one.
The food.
The food. Yeah, I would say. Yeah. I like analogies and all that. Yeah, I think the light is, you know, photography obviously means writing with light, and there's so much written and talked about regarding light. And I like this idea, kind of this search, like I mentioned with Van Gogh, and this finding, this discovering, versus maybe this imposing. You know, one of our languages, and I use studio lights too, but is use an external light to overpower the sun, which I think that's kind of a funny phrase, that we're like trying to be bigger, better, stronger than the sun. I mean, technically we're using light in a way that is removing the ambient light out of the equation. But I think with those things, with vision, with the caring less, and then just kind of having this curiosity, like, like what is the light here? Or what if I move a little bit over there? And as you mentioned, I do 90% of my work with available natural light. And when you don't have an external light, you really learn the subtlety of light. And you really have to say, oh my gosh, like people think, oh, natural light, it's easy, or it's sloppy, or it's because you're afraid of big lights. It is so much harder. And my thinking on that is, I'm going to go to another analogy, a violinist on the stage, and there she is. If she's in an orchestra and makes a mistake, no one hears it. I mean, most of us don't. If she's playing solo on the stage and it's an acoustic show and 1,000 people are listening to her, she hits one note wrong, that's all we hear. So I find in natural light, it's like that. You don't have the luxury of this big, bold, amazing pro photo light that's just, you know, going to make wherever you are perfect and wonderful. And so the subtlety matters. And so for me, I find it very challenging, very interesting. And just this idea, I think, you know, kind of having the curiosity to find it, say, okay, where is it? Where is this right now? And not being afraid of that search.
I really enjoy talking this way about photography, and I could go on, but we need to move on. Yeah, that's why I was saying to you before, we're not talking about settings and whatnot here, but we do for a minute when I talk about your gear. I know that you're a Sony ambassador, which obviously to people like me who are not ambassadors, we just think that means you get tons of free stuff. I'm sure it doesn't work like that, but that's the perception. So, but to keep it simple, instead of doing like an exhaustive deep dive into your bag, what camera are you using, and what's the lens when you put it on the camera? You're just like, yeah, this is my lens.
Yeah, I mean, back to the Sony thing, it's amazing to be part of that community. And what I love about Sony is they value photographers kind of like the way the Olympic Committee values athletes. What I mean by that is you can have someone really good at basketball. You can have someone who's a really good sprinter. You could have someone who's really good at archery. Neither of those athletes could play the other person's sport. Some of them are more front and center and popular. Some of them are more abstract, but they kind of build a team has so many different, they value so many different kinds of photography. So that's amazing to be part of a team like that, right? Because too often ego gets in the way in photography and people are like, well, I'm better than you, or some, it's like, no, the art isn't a competition. Even though we have likes and all these things, it's just about being creative in our own ways. So there's that. And then that shapes the gear that I use. The shoot last night, the two, I used a camera called the Sony A7R4. So I had that and a Sony A1, and the lenses I had were 24-70 and an 85. And apart from like the actual camera number or anything, I think really for students or for anyone, it's like find a camera that resonates with you, that feels good in your hand, that you like the settings, that all that kind of stuff. So it's almost like finding a guitar. You go to a guitar shop, like, do you like the sound? Do you like it? Like, reviews don't really matter anymore. I know it's bad to say that, but every camera is good enough now. It really is. Like if you go to a camera store and blindly just grab a camera, it's going to be good. Nothing's bad anymore. I mean, obviously some have strengths and weaknesses, but so find some that resonates. And then from a focal length perspective, again, think about how it is that you enjoy, appreciate the world. So some landscape photographers, like going back to my friend Chris Burkhardt, he'll shoot landscapes with a really wide angle lens because you have to get so close when you do that. And it creates a sense of intimacy. And he wants people to feel that sense of intimacy, that closeness. Other people maybe like to shoot landscapes with a really long focal length because they like the sense of compression. So almost like creating a scene that the human eye could never see, right? You shoot something at 400 millimeter focal length lens and like the moon looks big, but the eyes don't see it that way, and it looks big and close to the mountain, right? So anyway, just thinking through that. So for me, 24-70, it's not too wide. It's kind of right in the middle of being not too wide and also not too much compression. And then the 85, I would say, 90% of my favorite portraits are captured with that one. And I just love that focal length. I love the working distance. It's about 2 arms length from your subject. So you're not hollering. You're not saying, hey, tilt your head. You're not too far away. If you would, with a 200 millimeter focal length, you're close, it's conversational, and the look it's natural, but slightly heightened. So it's slightly favorable, but it still looks like that person, back to the old authentic word. So that's kind of the gear breakdown for me.
Brilliant. I love that. And so we'll put links in the show notes for your gear. Okay, the next round is called double exposure, okay? And I'm going to ask you about a particular image that I've taken a fancy to, and then I'll bounce it back to you to tell me about a memorable shoot or story from your photography journey. So I always pick out a few because you never know what's going to come up along the way, but there's a shoot that you did with, I'm going to try this, and please correct me, is it Yvonne Chouinard?
Yeah.
Okay. The CEO of Patagonia, and he just, he's been in the news quite recently, and
Yes.
so, well, maybe I'll let you paint the picture of who this man is. And the picture, because he owns a clothing company, but in the picture he looks like maybe he's in a metal workshop or something like that. So I was wondering what the story is with that picture.
Yeah, so Yvon is the founder of Patagonia and a pioneering mountain climber in Yosemite and other parts of the world, but and also an environmentalist. And most recently, he has changed the ownership of his company to the whole devotion of his company is to save planet Earth. And so he's really done some pioneering work. He's a profoundly impressive person. So that shoot is in his blacksmith shop where it all started. He started making climbing gear for his friends.
Right.
And that is kind of a cliche in a way to do, meaning it's like if you're photographing a basketball player, having them go to the court, their home court or something, or a golfer with a golf club. But I felt like that was an important part of his story. So I went there. And I guess the reason I'm saying that is with my students too. I say, don't be afraid of the cliche, like go there. And sometimes you shoot that like I did there, but I also shot an up close portrait of him as well. So I think of it as like a both and kind of occasion. And one, you see him in that space. And then that second shot, you see this up close version of him. And at that moment, I was asking him about why the environment matters to him. And it's very popular for companies to say the environment matters to us, but I wanted to hear from him. And he told a story just about this village he had visited, and they didn't have access to clean water, and a bunch of the kids were going blind. And he was just really upset about that. And so for him, the environment is something very personal and very human. It's like the impact on us as humans. And so that, I feel like that fills those frames. And so again, like at least for me, when I'm working with someone, is like getting them to, having a conversation about something. So that fills the frames versus like, hey, stand there. That looks cool. Boom. I want the authentic thing. I want the real deal. And so that's the story with that one.
Yeah. And so that up close portrait is would be your kind of signature shot, right? Or that's how I might put it. But
and I know I needed both. So the one of them, he's like in the one up close, he's just standing in the doorway, and then the background becomes dark because that's how the light falls off. But yeah, and that comes from a friend of mine who really encouraged me to think cinematographically. So she would say, like, Chris, get the establishing scene, which shows more, get like a 3/4 shot, a little bit closer, and then get the up close shot. So in that case, maybe I only did 2 of those. Maybe I did a bigger one, but it didn't turn out. Yeah. And that's even that concept though, I think it's a good reminder for all of us to remember, like, if you're doing whatever work it is, let's say if I'm doing a fashion shoot, I could shoot fashion, but I could also shoot a portrait at the same time of someone who's there. It could be the hair and makeup artist. It could be the model. It could be someone else. But just because we're doing one thing doesn't mean we can't do another. And that depends on vision. So for me, vision, I needed to tell the story of the space. That's where this whole thing started. I had to tell that story. That was my vision. I had one camera, one lens. That was it. Carry less, capture more. And then, I had to just really just lean into that, and then obviously capture those 2 images. And I had maybe, 2 minutes or something. He's a busy guy. And so it's not like you have 4 hours to like create these shoots and build this thing and have assistants. It's just me and a camera, right? And that's how a lot of my work's done. How
do you find those quick shoots? I like them. Like, I would always wish to have more time with people, but the few times, sometimes if it's the CEO, or one time I photographed this guy who was the first minister of Scotland. It's kind of like a prime minister of Scotland, or an athlete. There was a world record holder athlete who was in town. I managed to swing 5 minutes with that guy. So these ones where you get a real short period of time, for me, it makes me just go to the thing, Makes me get straight to the one best idea that I could have, or the one idea I'm going to put my bets on anyway. Yeah. How do you find that time scale of a shoot? Do you work better quick, or would you rather have more time?
Yeah, I really resonate with what you said there, that like creativity when given, there's some great quote, I'm going to get it wrong, but when given unlimited amount of space, it sprawls. So if you have, like, let's say I had 10 hours with him, mm-hmm. he would just get so sick of it. It would, mm-hmm. Just diluted. It would be horrible. So yeah, I think there is incredible value in that very narrow limit, and just saying, like, okay, here we go. Even finding the light. It's like, okay, here's this. There's enough light there. There's enough light here. Okay, thank you so much. And part of that comes from, a friend of mine who met Bono, the lead singer of the band U2, who was one of his heroes. And he met him at his church in Hollywood. And Bono and the Edge came to this church there, and he met after church. He saw them and walked up and said hi. This guy was a musician, whatever. And I said, well, how was it? What was it like? He said it was so weird, because I realized I had so much interest in talking with them, meeting them, all of that, and they had no interest in me.
Yeah.
And he just had never thought through that. And he's like, mm-hmm. Of course they didn't. They don't know who I am, But I think that exaggerated example is what happens on a smaller scale to us as photographers. Mm-hmm. Even in the street, we see someone that looks really cool, and we think, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to go photograph. I could photograph this person for 4 hours, because we could. I could photograph someone for 4 hours, and I don't need to eat or drink or sleep. This is so fascinating. But on the other end, it isn't at all fascinating. And so, like, when you meet celebrities or leaders or fascinating people, it's learning how to err on the side of having a light touch and not taking too much time. Mm-hmm. And so I find when you have those creative experiences of very limited time, it's a way to train yourself to, I'm sure for you, let's say a CEO or the, what was it? Prime Minister.
The First Minister.
First Minister, yes. You're like, okay, here we go. We do this, and then we're done. And we say thank you, and you honor them and their time. And would it have been great if they gave you 4 hours? Sure, but that just doesn't happen in life. And that's also not the craft of photography. It's a pretty quick craft at the end of the day. I think there are people out there who get 2 days with a celebrity, maybe, but I think that era is done. Mm-hmm. I think it's all exploring that and being in tune with that. And I would even say, let's say I photographed my sister, who loves me and I love her. If I said, hey, I want to do this shoot because I'm creating this tutorial, and she'd be like, well, how long? I'd say 15 minutes. She'd be like, okay. I would need to end that shoot at about 12 minutes, not mm-hmm. at 30 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd need to not just only honor the time I said, but then some, even cut it shorter. So long story short, I think embracing the limit as an opportunity to learn and to really refine and hone your skills, boom, that is so, so hugely important. With my students, I would see them just kind of almost be sloppy with their time, if that makes sense. In my workshops too, and just because they're kind of like, well, I could reshoot it. I'm like, no, you can't. Mm-hmm. You have to, that goes back to the thing we were talking about. You got to have the vision. You got to have exactly what you need to execute that. You got to find, be curious. What's the light? Okay, here it is. Boom, done. Thank you. Gone. That's it. Because if you have a lot of time, of course, that's easy. That's not hard. If someone said for the First Minister, hey, we're going to give you 45 minutes with him, you could be like, great. You could talk with him. You could get to know where he stands on certain policies. You could have 3 sets, walk him through the 3 sets, give him a cup of tea. Easy. So it's almost like you need less preparation for that than you would for, okay, you're going to get 60 seconds when he walks by this door. Mm-hmm. I need you to engage. I need you to connect. I need one picture, and then we're gone, Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
What about people come in front of the camera and the first thing they say is, I hate being photographed.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Or sometimes if they don't always say that, but you can be chatting, like the little small talk
Yeah.
before you go. When you lift the camera, you see them kind of go
Oh
like
my
this,
gosh,
you
yeah.
know, like, so you see them physically tense up. Say you've got that 5 minutes with somebody, what's kind of, how do you go? I mean, I know it's different for every person, but
Yeah.
generally, what are you trying to do to kind of just ease that?
Yeah. That, it happens to me all the time, and I work really well with people who don't like being photographed. That's kind of one of my specialties.
Mm-hmm.
And so, first of all, it comes from being photographed myself. So anytime someone says, "Can I take your picture?" I say yes. Photographers will always say, "Well, I'm more comfortable behind the camera." I'm like, "Of course you are."
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's so much easier to take a picture than to be photographed. So it would be similar to, like, I don't know, maybe if we were a dentist, it would be like, you need to get your teeth cleaned once a month. Just know what it's like to lay in the chair, have someone ask you questions, feel how awkward it is, hear the noise. You have to experience that. You have to build up the empathetic muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be the first thing. Like, if I was at a workshop and someone said that, I would be like, all right, I'm shooting you in front of everyone right now. Come in here. Let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talk about the experience and the anxiety they had and how their face went flush and all those things. So empathy, number one. Number two is camera's always visible. I never make a big reveal of the camera. So if you have a subject who's nervous and all of a sudden pull it out, the camera out of the bag or something, they're like, or like, oh, what kind, so camera's just casual. It's there. It's visible. It's not anything scary. It's just part of the mix. Second thing is I take an image really early. So if I had like 2 minutes with someone, I'd be like, hey, let me get a quick picture. Okay, yeah. So here's what I'm doing. And I get the first picture out of the way.
Right.
It's similar to a kid being on a high dive. If they stay up there for too long, they'll never jump.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to just get to the end of the high dive, jump off, get momentum. Then if they say flat out, I feel, I hate having my photograph taken, I say, oh, I know what you mean. I mean, it is so brutal. I mean, who likes this? But I tell you what, I'll make this is going to be easy as possible. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. And so I give them, I set their expectation. I walk them through what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And I see this as an opportunity to connect with them versus as an opportunity to shame them, because they're basically saying, I feel horrible. And you say, oh, I know this is hard. I'm with you, but let me tell you, we're going to do one shot by this tree. It'll be really cool because it'll the natural vibe. We'll do one over there on the white background. It'll be really professional and strong. This whole thing's going to take 4 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is. Walk with me over here. We'll have my friend over there. Make sure your hair looks good, whatever. But basically I'm building their assurance. I'm not afraid of that comment. When someone says that comment, I'm just like, I see it as a golden opportunity. The same thing would be if you came over to my house and I said, hey, come on in. We're going to have dinner. I'm like, how are you doing? You said, I'm really kind of bummed right now because I just got this bad news. I would rather you say that than have us eat dinner together and just not know what was wrong. But if you said something went wrong, I would say, oh, I'm so sorry. Tell me about that. Or even with the nervousness thing, I don't like being photographed. Like, you could say, I get that. Or I might say, like, well, when you have been photographed, what are images that you do like of yourself? And they'll give you hints. They'll be like, well, I never like it when they get so close to me and they see my chin. I'm like, totally. Yeah, we will not do that. And then they're like, wow, this person is hearing me.
Yeah.
They're collaborating with me. So that I just almost like get excited when that happens. And that's what I encourage my students to do, is to see that vulnerability. And then if they're not saying it, but you're feeling it, you feel the tension. There's different things I'll do to kind of release the tension, ask questions, get them to move, breathing, let me just think of one. I was photographing this woman. She was really tense. And I just said, hey, let's do a photograph with like one of your kids in mind. Like, pick one of your kids out. And she was like, my son, David. I'm like, okay. Close your eyes. Think about something you love about David. So she did that. And she just warmed up, melted. All the anxiety's gone. I said, now look back at the camera. And she looked back with this just simple, warm smile, beautiful image. And that was a way to get her off worrying about herself for her looks. So I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a really great answer. And I love how you go to empathy, and it's just been a thread that's gone through our conversation and shifting your focus away from yourself, kind of putting yourself in other people's shoes kind of thing. But it really comes through in your photography. So I'm glad that you've had the opportunity to kind of illustrate that.
Yeah. And I think if someone, looks at my photographs, like right now, if they were to pull them up or something, they would see like, wow, you really feel, and I'm just saying this kind of in a joking way, but people always tell me this, I feel so connected to the person. I feel like I feel that empathy. I feel like the sense of soul. I feel like you're really, and it's like, well, yeah, because 30 seconds earlier, the person said, I hate having my picture taken. And I said, I know, it is so hard. And then once I've said that, then the connection's capable of happening. But if I said, oh, you're stupid, you look great, it would be similar if you came over for dinner and said, well, I just had bad news. I'd be like, don't worry about it. Here's a beer. You'd be like, okay, I'm supposed to have fun now, versus honoring wherever they're coming from.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I totally agree. Amazing. So let me throw this back to you for this round. Okay. Is there a picture or experience or anecdote from your photography journey that's just super memorable?
Man, so many just flashed across my mind of different ones. I think maybe I'll go to one where I was doing a lighting setup on my driveway recently, and I had my daughter take a picture of me, and she's 10 years old, and she took this photograph of me that's gotten more likes than any of the photographs I've taken. And so we talk about that. I'm like, well, next time I go to New York to speak, they're probably going to invite you. And she's like, they probably will.
Yeah.
And just if we were to look at that image, I think you see the connection, father to daughter in that. And that, again, I guess maybe it comes back around to the whole thing we've been saying is that connection is really what it's about. It's not about the Profoto B10. It's not about the Sony A1 and the 85 lens or whatever. All those things are great and all those things help. But you can take really bad pictures with really great gear. And the challenge is to find ways to make the connection. And even there, because I wanted to take her picture, so I stepped in front of the camera. Actually, I did take her picture, but she looked so much different than my subject. So then I had her take a picture of me. So it was a collaborative thing. So basically then there was a collaborative energy happening as well. So anyway, that was a fun experience. And I'm just so proud of her that she did that, and that the eye autofocus is so good now. Like, these cameras are so good. You can hand it to a 10-year-old and she gets a better picture than, from Instagram's perspective, than I've gotten my whole career, right? Which is kind of funny, but kind of awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great picture. I know the one you're talking about. So, yeah. But cool. Okay, great answer. It's so funny, it ties into your previous answer. And when I do pictures of myself and I do a setup, I always try and take a picture of myself just so I can update my headshot. And also, again, you're just getting yourself into the rhythm of knowing what you're about to put the people through. And they think, I can be smiling. I think I'm hey, but when I look up there in the picture, it's I have no smile.
Yes.
And so the thing that I started to do to trick myself was to think about my daughter, and that just lets some love well up, So I've been asking people to do that as well in shoots, and you've been doing it for years already. So there you go.
Yeah. No, but that's true. Or the other thing, one thing my daughter told me, not on this shoot, but another time, she's like, Dad, whenever someone takes a photograph of you, you always look so mean. and I was like, what do you, and I think what it was is I was trying to look cool.
Yeah.
And cool tends to be, it's a little stoic, but I was kind of going too far with it. And so I realized you're kind of right, so I think you can be calm, but have that warmth well up in you, if that's the kind of photograph you want, of course. Um, and so learning about the variation on your expression even, and doing it yourself. Like, I don't know, like, yeah, like you're saying, sometimes when you smile, you think, oh, this smile is way overdone. But then you look at it on camera, and you realize, no, that's authentic. That's true. It's just that we play these weird games in our head, and we worry about weird things when we're being photographed. We become highly self-conscious, we start to doubt ourselves. So anyway, that's cool that you do that.
It's just a trick. But you can get the most authentic love when you think about those people. So,
yes. Yeah.
So, this has been a blast. So appreciate it. This is the final round. Okay. And I call it, I call it motor drive. It's a quick fire round.
Okay. Boom, boom, boom.
So, okay. Wide angle or telephoto?
Telephoto.
Color or black and white?
Wow. Color.
Expensive lens cloth or the corner of your shirt?
Lens cloth.
Oh, okay.
Because cool. my wife uses like a fabric softener, and so that stuff is so bad for your lenses. But yeah.
All right. Oh man.
Well, there's so many, because it makes your shirt smell good, but then there's actually like a, I don't know, it's like a plasticky thing on the clothing that makes the clothing soft. But that, you don't want to get that on your lenses. Anyway, keep going.
So many people are at the corner of the shirt, so they're all going to be regretting it now. I'm just going to have to stop using conditioner. What's your go-to emoji?
Shaka.
I knew it was going to be Shaka. Okay, best California band or musician? This is really hard.
Yeah, that's easy. Jack Johnson.
Oh, cool. Okay, and you photographed?
Yeah.
So your friends, or how did that come up? Yeah.
They have a home in Santa Barbara, and he was. I mean, the one of the photos I have of him, which is funny, he was biked up to the beach to check the waves, and we were chatting, and so he's sitting on his bike, his hands are on the handlebars. You can't see that because I cropped in close, but I think it's just sort of a fitting way to photograph him. He's barefoot, he's on a bike, he's checking the waves. You never know that in the picture. Yeah, so I love his music.
Cool. I like Jason Mraz. I'm a big Jason Mraz fan.
Yes. Yes.
So what's a weird thing I could find in your camera bag?
Harmonica.
Cool. Okay, cool. You just bust it out every now and again. And...
Oh yeah, I'm packing for New York, and it's on my table to bring with me.
Cool. Okay, cool. Okay, we've spoken about. There's one name that's came up, Chris, but any photographer that we should just know about, people should go check out.
Yes. Oh man, a photographer we should know about. Let me think about this. Oh my gosh, my mind's racing through all so many different ones, and I'm going to answer this a little bit differently, because this is more about my own journey. I recently have given away maybe 30 photography books. I know that sounds horrible, but I realized that I've had too much input, and that I've needed to narrow that down. So what I would say, I know I'm kind of breaking your question, but I would say, like, follow less photographers. And I think I do once a year, I unfollow everyone on Instagram and go back to zero. Because I think what tends to happen is we do want to get influence from people. And we do want to follow photographers who are amazing. And there's so many amazing ones. But what happens to most of us is we do more following than we do creating, and we do more consuming than creating. And so a great creative exercise, I mean, anyone who's gutsy enough would be to unfollow, everyone but 5 people, and then just follow those 5 photographers or friends or whatever for a month. And I think if you did that, you would get so good. I mean, you would really, really learn. You would have a mentor. I mean, imagine if you only followed one photographer, or only had one photography book or one photography thing. So again, I think there's different seasons of life, and maybe, at certain seasons, it's great to have 100 people that you follow and like, or 1,000 people or 5,000 people. But I know for me, less is more. So that's going to be my answer.
Cool. Great answer. Okay. This is the last question. Yeah. When do you feel at peace with the universe?
When do I feel at peace with the universe? Well, I practiced yoga this morning. I think yoga is a really important part. I think out on walks with my dogs, really anything with my family, my wife, my 3 daughters. But I think maybe just to find it, I think it's definitely outdoors, and it's definitely in nature, and it's definitely by myself. I think solitude has become a really, really important part of who I am and how I approach life. And then making sure I cultivate that solitude and directly correlates to how good my quality of life and my photography is. If that makes sense. So
yeah, no, it does make sense. I get it. Chris, thank you so much. You've given me a lot of time.
This is great.
Great answers. Yeah, it's been great.
Well, let's hang out at some point. Someday when I'm over there, you're over here. Let's find an excuse to meet up in real time. But this is the blessing and benefit of photography, is connecting with great people like you. So I really appreciate it.